Hello and welcome back to Everyday Writers, your one-stop shop for demystifying the writing process. We're here to be helpful guides on your journey to becoming a published author. I'm one of your hosts, Crystal McQueen.
I'm your other host, Jordan S. Keller, and on today's bonus author interview episode, we'd like to welcome to the show R. Dean Johnson, or Rob for short.
So,
Hello.
our Dean Johnson grew up in Southern California, where everyone calls him Rob, Bobby, or Bob, all of which I have heard him called and answered to. He lives in Kentucky with his wife and fellow writer Julie Hensley and their two children, three cats, hermit crab, a dog, and seven chickens. He is the director of Eastern Kentucky's low residency MFA creative writing program, Bluegrass Writers Studio, which I attended. He is also the author of a short story collection, Delicate Men, a creative nonfiction chapbook, Something LA, and a novel, Californium. His essays and stories have appeared in several national literary journals, including Ascent, Louisville Review, Ruminate, Salt Hill, to name a few. In addition to EKU, he has taught creative writing programs at Prescott College, oh, Yava Yavapai College. Is that how you say that? Okay. Cameron University and Gotham's Writing Workshop. Rob, that is an amazing, impressive bio. Welcome to the show.
Thanks. It's really good to be here.
So, jumping right on into things, how did you go from a professor to director of an MFA program? And can you talk a little bit about how that program is structured?
Yeah. So when I arrived at Eastern Kentucky University in 2008, the MFA program was brand new. So they hired three professors, which is unheard of, all in the same year. And so they went from having one creative writing professor to four. And the four of us were able to start shaping the MFA program. Really, like all the things we loved about our own MFA programs and the things that we wished our MFA programs had had. And even though we had a director at the time, Young Smith, it was very collaborative. So after Young was stepped down from being director, my colleague Derek Nikitas became director, and he held the post for a few years, and we continued to advance the program, I think, in a lot of great ways. And then when it came time for Derek to step down because he was taking another job, really Julie Hensley, one of my colleagues, and my wife, was in line to be the director, but we had just had our second child, and so the timing was kind of terrible for her to take over as director, and so I inherited the position. But again, it's always been a very collaborative effort amongst the faculty. So it wasn't like I was elected or it was almost like it was my turn. That said, I've now held it longer than anybody else because I don't know why uh, I guess I haven't done a good enough job. So our program is structured in a really unique way. We're a low residency program, and maybe this is the moment to say that a resident program, of course, is like Iowa or Johns Hopkins or Columbia, where you move to that city and go to that university. Low res programs, you don't have to leave your house except for going to residency. So our program's a low res program, but most of those back in the day were you mail in your manuscript, the professor responds to it and sends it back to you. You get a reading list. You probably write some responses to those things. Our program was started from the get-go with live online workshops, which was great because you still get the benefit of having classmates and getting their feedback as well as the professors. And I learned as a student myself. I sometimes learned just as much from having to respond to my classmates as I did from the feedback I was getting in my own stories. It was usually when it was a story I did not like and would not have ever written myself. And then I'm like, oh gosh, I can't be a jerk in workshop. And so I really got to think of like how to respond to this. And so it would make me really gauge and think about craft in important ways. And I can see that now in our own. I mean, I'm not necessarily seeing my students not liking their classmates' work, but I can see that it makes them be more engaged because they have to be responsible for their words in workshop. And so that's one of the things that I love about our low res program.
Very
So,
cool.
as somebody who attended that low residency program, I can attest to just how fantastic it is. I loved the very first online workshop that I did was Young Smith's movie critique. And so we did a bunch of movies. And I was like, why in a writing program are we critiquing movies? And that's still one of my favorite. I guess they were the asynchronous classes that you didn't attend together, but you did all the forums and stuff. Um, Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, you know, I think it's really easy to feel like, oh, if I'm not reading literature or I'm not reading, books that are on the New York Times bestseller list or shortlisted somewhere that I'm not serving my writing properly, and that's not true.
Yeah.
Everything is possible material and learning for writers, and if you pick up a voice or an idea from watching a show or I don't know, surfing online or scrolling through your phone, that's legitimate. It's just if you're doing that instead of writing, that's the only time you that the guilt is legit.
Well, way back in 2020, when you and I first had our first phone conversation, we talked about the pros and cons of getting into an MFA for a creative writing. So, would you mind sharing with our listeners some of the advice that you gave me as far as what the pros and cons are of getting an MFA?
Yeah, yeah. I probably said this to you too, because I'm not supposed to say this, but nobody needs an MFA to be a writer. You just don't, right? If you're a good writer, someone will publish you because your credentials don't matter. The manuscript's what matters first and foremost. And so people that are on the fence about it, or it's the last thing in the world they ever want to do, that's the good news. Some of us need the structure of a writing program. Some of us need the colleagues and the classmates and to be held responsible. I was definitely one of those people. I would not be a published author if I had not gone to an MFA program. I just didn't have the discipline or the background, I think. But I'm amazed at some people come into an MFA program. They are so well read. They know so much about craft, and they may have been able to do it on their own. I'm not sure. But so one of the advantages to an MFA program is that you're held accountable. You have deadlines to meet, and writers need deadlines. Uh, I always share this joke, and it's back in the day before computer aided drafting. The saying at Boeing was, "When the blueprints start to outweigh the potential plane that we're thinking about making, we need to build the plane." And I think a lot of writers will just obsess over a paragraph, obsess over a story, and keep revising, revising, revising. And it's easy if you don't have deadlines to just keep revising and keep working on it and not actually get it out into the world. And so MFA programs give you deadlines. They hold you responsible in good ways, and they give you that writing community because writing is such a lonely endeavor. And to know that you're going to be talking about in class or talking about somebody else's work, to know that your classmates are trying to meet the same deadlines you're trying to meet. I think there's a real community and a collaboration that happens in MFA programs. Certainly, my own experience in an MFA program was I felt really close to my classmates, and
Yeah.
I couldn't have gotten that anywhere else.
Well, I told you before we started that we all went together. You're back.
So sorry.
Okay. Um, the people that we went to school with, so Rob is married to Julie, and they work together. And my husband and I went to the same MFA program together. But we're still friends with all of those people that we went to school with. We still keep in contact with them. We have a monthly writers group out of some of our colleagues. We were also talking about getting together to do a writing retreat this summer. So, like there are long lasting connections. It is a very expensive endeavor. But one of the things that I got out of the MFA program, Rob, was just the amount of looking at writing that isn't like your own and understanding it. So we had a whole conversation about Moby Dick and just how much of a painful slog that book was for me to get through. I know a lot of people really enjoyed it. But like there were 8 pages on a single picture in a hallway at the beginning of the book. And I think that was where like I felt like the whole book went downhill from there. But you told me you learned so much from that book. And so I do think that one of the things that I got out of an MFA was considering different structures of writing that I would not have considered had I not.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. And absolutely, not only are your classmates going to be writing things that you may love or you may not love, most MFA programs have literature requirements, usually contemporary literature, but sometimes you reach back to the canonical stuff, and you read things that you wouldn't have picked up on your own. And
Mhm.
so I know when I teach forms of the novel, I have everyone read Mrs. Dalloway, which is
Yeah.
a high modernist novel, and you should know Mrs. Dalloway because Virginia Woolf is punk rock. She is breaking the rules because she can, and she is doing things that people before her weren't doing. And even if you don't love Mrs. Dalloway, like you don't love, I don't know, the Dead Kennedys, they broke the rules so you can learn from that and get to the next level, right? It helps advance the art form. And so we also read not long after that The Hours, which is a reinvention of Mrs. Dalloway, and to me a much more enjoyable book to read. Mrs. Dalloway is a tough book, but you need to read these books that are going to challenge you. And even if you aren't going to copy that and make it part of your own writing, you still learn from it. 'Cause I probably told you this when we spoke all those years ago. I did not like Moby Dick either. But years later, I was working on a short story and I got to this moment of high drama and I was afraid it was going to turn into melodrama. And suddenly I started writing it like it was a play, the
Yep.
way in Moby Dick, when suddenly the Pequod deck becomes a stage, and he stops writing in traditional dialogue and writes it like theater, and I'm like shaking my fist at Melville because I stole his idea because he was so far ahead of his time, and it works for that story. I wound up publishing that story later. It's in my collection now as well, and I wouldn't change it. It was the right thing to do in that moment. I wouldn't have thought of it if I hadn't read Moby Dick.
Which story was written that way? Was that part of Delicate Men?
It is part of Delicate Men, and oh my gosh, how am I forgetting the name of that story? It's been a long time.
I read
It's
your
the one.
book like 2 years ago. I can't remember which one was written that way.
Yeah, yeah. It's the story where the cousin is out to California to visit his other cousin to try and save him from the boyfriend that the cousin has met because he
Oh,
thinks the boyfriend is, yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
and yeah, and so there's a confrontation late in that story between the cousin who's trying to save his cousin and that cousin's boyfriend. And you would think I would know the name of my own story, but it's been a while since I read it myself.
Well, speaking of your own stories, your essay collection, Poser, a mostly true memoir, has been longlisted for the 2026 International Voices in Creative Nonfiction Competitions. Congratulations on that. I can't wait to hear more
Thank
news
you.
upon it. Can you let our listeners know what this essay collection is about?
Yeah, it is. It's about imposter syndrome, and it started on accident. I was just when I was not feeling, I was working on my novel at the same time, and when I would get a little bit slow or didn't feel like working on the novel, but wanted to make sure I was keeping those muscles going, I would just write essays. And one of the reasons I would write essays is because I already knew the story. They're personal essays, and so I would just think of something that was interesting and kind of explore it. And then after I'd written a few of these and published a few of these, I started noticing a pattern from my own childhood and teen years and 20s where I spent a lot of time faking it and almost making it. And so that's what the essays do. And so at first they're fun and kind of over the top. The essay Something LA, which was the chapbook, is about me going to a modeling agency party in Hollywood because a friend of mine was interning at the modeling agency, and that sounds great when you're in your 20s and you're single. But then when you get to the modeling agency party, everyone there's a model. And so the women are gorgeous, the men are gorgeous, and you're just normal. And so suddenly I was like, and not to ruin it, but I run in. So Keanu Reeves is at that party, and Real Yankovic is at that party, and I won't go into too much more detail because it's a really fun story. But part of nonfiction, right, is getting past the surface level and what does this really mean? What's the subtext here? And that one's loaded with subtext, and it was a lot of fun to revisit that, especially in hindsight.
That was really fun to read too. So,
Thanks.
you said it's a collection of short stories. Uh, the last one I remember, you read it at one of the residencies. It was in a grocery store, and do you know what I'm talking about? And it was like Popovich or something like that.
I think the grocery store one.
Oh,
I'm
and they
well. Are
have
you?
like flyers for their band, and like,
Oh, yeah, that's a short story. Yeah,
is that in
that was
it? I didn't think that
yeah,
was
that was
true.
Alexandrov and Petrushki, which was
Petruski, Popovich,
yes, yes.
Petruski.
Yeah,
Yeah,
tomato,
which is
tomato.
it's a reinvention of A&P by John Updike, because early in that story he says, in the future in 1990, when Alexandrov and when A&P is bought by the Russians, it becomes Alexandrov and Petrushki's. And so my idea for the story was, well, I'm going to set it in the 1990s in Southern California, and it's going to be a Whole Foods store called Alexandrov and Petrushki's.
Yeah.
And so Sammy becomes Samira, and I had a lot of fun writing that. Was so Yeah,
Yeah.
that one's not true though. That's definitely a story. That one's not
Chaos
an essay.
ensues. Yeah. No, that was
Yeah.
a great one. Well, on Everyday Writers, we do like to talk to authors about their approach to writing, and you are a very busy individual. So, can you talk to us a little bit about how you fit writing in? It sounds like you're still prolific even with your full-time job, and the residency is no joke. It's a lot of work.
No, it really is. I mean, it is 9 to 9, right? You're up early, you're out late, and then you get home and you're prepping for the next day, which is it's exhausting and fun, I think.
It's a
But
lot of
yeah,
fun.
yeah, but you're exhausted by the end of it. So yeah, it's during the semester, in the fall and spring semester, I'm busy teaching a lot of the time. So the things that I do when I'm being good
Yeah.
is Tuesday and Thursday morning, I get up about 5:30. It helps to be married to a writer because if I don't want to get out of bed and she is getting out of bed, I got to get out of bed.
That must be
And we,
nice.
we make coffee and we go to our separate parts of the house and we write for an hour before the kids are up, before the day has started. And it's amazing how Tuesday and Thursday you feel like you've accomplished something before 8 a.m. because you wrote for an hour. And on Fridays, we have a writing date where we just walk downtown to the coffee house. I'll give a plug for it, Purdy's Coffee in
Yeah,
Richmond, Kentucky.
it's a good one.
Outstanding coffee. Yeah,
Yep.
great atmosphere, great coffee. And so we go there and we write for about 2 or 3 hours. So that's where I spend a lot of time. When I got my agent for my novel, I was sitting in Purdy's Coffee House because even when I'm out writing, I'm trying to do something writing related on those days. And I was querying agents that day, and I just happened to get an email pop up from an agent while I was sitting there. So,
Did you?
Sorry, I want to ask about the book you're writing. Like, what book, what novel are you working on right now?
my novels, uh, the working title is Ignoreland, and it
Ignoreland.
is Ignoreland. Yes, and if you can remember, if you're old enough, the Let's Go Europe guides, which you used to have to carry with you all over Europe in the 1990s and early 2000s, it's structured like a Let's Go guide, and it's a loose retelling of a farewell to arms. It's an American in Europe getting himself into some trouble.
Mm.
It's hopefully funny, and the I guess the major not the major, the meet cute that happens in it is he meets a Dutch girl at a hostel, and he doesn't know it at the time, but she's a recovering heroin addict,
Uh,
and it takes a dark turn. So yeah, but I'm about 75 pages in, and
wow, congratulations.
got a lot of voice. I was at a residency and I was able to make some time and really get stuck in. And I'm going to be going back to a residency in January, and I'll have more sustained time to write. And hopefully, I can get through. It's going to be a 3-part book, and I just want to get through part one and get on to part two, just so I can keep that momentum going. This is a book my agent has been wanting for a long time, but I wanted to finish the essay collection and get that out into the world because
Yeah.
it was so close to being done. And so I stalled for a long time. And so,
The
because,
residency
I
that
mean, that
you're,
is the hardest thing, I think, when you're writing is to find the time to write.
Yeah.
Uh, you know,
Yeah.
but it sounds like you've got a good schedule going with your Tuesday, Thursday, and Fridays.
it's not as much as I would like for sure.
Mhm.
But yeah, because, and then sometimes, stuff happens, a kid is sick or, work is just something big has come up and, I have to prep for a meeting or something because I do administrative stuff, which,
Oh,
yeah. So when I'm good, most weeks, 2 or 3 days of writing, but
mhm.
there are weeks where maybe one day.
Yeah.
Well, between writing essays, short stories, and novels, do you have a preference of which you prefer? And then how do you know when you get a new idea, what platform would they be best to be expressed through?
Yeah, that's a good question. Oh, gosh, I don't know if I have a preference. My short work, I have a lot more success with my essays than I do with my stories. I don't know if my essays are that much better than my stories, but I know that literary journals are always hungry for essays, and so I think they're not getting as many. And I learned early on that I've never had a short story published in the Southern Review, but I've had an essay published in the Southern Review. I've never had a short story published in Permafrost. I've sent them, but I have an essay published in Permafrost. And so the essays, they're not easy to place, but I've had better luck with the upper echelon of the lit journal world
The
with my essays
caliber
and
of
my
the
stories.
journals. Yeah.
Yeah, but I was able to get an agent for my novel, and it came out with Plume, which is part of Penguin Random House. And my essay collection so far, my agent said I can't sell an essay collection. It's something that you're going to have to take out yourself. And so, in terms of my nonfiction book length wise, you know, fingers crossed on the contest and some good independent
Mhm.
presses. So, gosh, I don't know if I have a preference. I think just whatever project I'm on, I get excited about. And but when I sit down, if I'm going to write an essay, they're almost always personal essays or something I want to explore. And so, like the essay that was published in Permafrost, I learned that the scene from I'm drawing a blank on the Quentin Tarantino movie with Pulp Fiction, the scene in Pulp Fiction where they are at Jack Rabbit Slim's.
Mm.
That Jack Rabbit Slim's is completely made up. It's just a studio set, but the outside of it is an old bowling alley in Glendale, California. And then I started thinking about all the places in California that I'd been growing up, or when family was out visiting that I'd taken, so they could just see, like, experience California the way they're supposed to experience California, which is a total facade. And so I just started exploring that idea in the essay. And so it's usually pretty clear to me that, oh, this is going to be an essay, as opposed to, if I come up with another idea, a line or a character, and I just know it's going to be a story.
Very cool.
That is really, really cool. Well, Rob, that is all the time that we have for this bonus episode of Everyday Writers. Can you tell our listeners where they might find out more about you, your writing, and if they want to, reach out about the Bluegrass Writers Studio? Shameless
Sure.
plug.
Let's see. I have a website, so ardeenwriter.com, and I'm on Instagram as Ardeen Writer, and Facebook and Threads. Those are my three.
Is
And
anybody really on Threads?
I know, right? Yeah. So, and yeah, I spend more of my time on Instagram than anywhere else, I think.
Mhm.
Mm, same.
Let's see. And then for the Bluegrass Writers Studio, I think if you just type Bluegrass Writers Studio in a search, it'll come up. But I believe it's creative writing at EKU,
Mm,
or creative writing, yeah, at eku.edu. Or is
okay.
that an email address? But if you type creative Bluegrass Writers Studio, you'd probably, well, my dog's going crazy. um, you'll find Bluegrass Writers Studio in a search engine. We trademarked the name years and years ago because we were
Nice.
afraid the University of Kentucky would steal it from under us. So, and we are good friends with them. They are great. They have their own MFA
Mm,
program. It's resident. It's not a rivalry, but we wanted to make sure we had that name.
yeah.
Well, I know at our writing group, we're very grateful that Crystal went through this program with you because, like, I feel like every other week we're like, Crystal, what do you think this is? Or what do you think this kind of structure would be like? And what book recommendation do you have? And so,
Oh, that's
but
great. Yeah.
That's
yeah,
really flattering, but she's overhyping it.
no, we are very grateful. But for our listeners, please join us next week where Crystal and I will talk about first page do's and don'ts and how to make sure yours stands out among the crowd. If you love what you hear on Everyday Writers, don't forget to click that subscribe button and follow Crystal and I on Instagram and Rob as well.
And remember, every day is a good day to write. See you next time.